like all the big podcasts are in person. Very, 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 very few shows are remote. So if you're serious about getting the best quality product, that is going to come from the in-person stuff. And I'm investing thousands of dollars in my in-person equipment so I can do more of that for that reason. The in-person stuff is higher quality. It's more work to get it done, but it makes a difference.
Welcome to the Communication Queens podcast for the visionary leaders, speakers, service providers, and podcasters who are looking to stand out sharing their story. I'm your host, Kimberly Spencer, former screenwriter turned master communications coach. On this podcast, I'll be coaching you on how to share your own transformation story so that you increase your visibility, influence, and income on podcast interviews. Let's get your voice heard.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to share with you the fact that my book, Make Every Podcast Want You, How to Become So Radically Interesting You'll Barely Keep From Interviewing Yourself, is now available on Amazon. So this episode is sponsored by my book. I am so excited to have birthed this book baby into the world. So click the link below and you will get your copy. I am so honored and excited to have been on this journey with you. This is the book that combines all the NLP communication strategies that we talk about on this podcast, along with podcast guesting strategies, tips, tricks, and how you share your story so that you serve, connect, and sell with your message. This book combines all of that to make you a radically interesting and masterful podcast guest that every podcast will want to have, including the top 1%. So let's get you booked on those top 1% of podcasts when you get your copy of Make Every Podcast Want You, How to Become So Radically Interesting You Will Barely Keep From Interviewing Yourself. Click the link below to buy it now. What's that?
The Yas Queen.
Oh, is that a queen? Is that a crown?
I was doing like the Yas Queen thing.
I was like, is that a moose?
No, I don't. I'm like voguing over here.
Not fully translating, but I appreciate hand gestures. You know, interpretive dance is a wonderful form of expression.
It is. I'm with you there.
So, yeah, I think that that's great, especially with your agency. We can also talk about the differences between a traditional PR agency and marketing agencies, and like what they typically are doing compared to what podcast agencies are doing, and how we can make a bigger impact in the world. Because I do think podcasters are going to be the historians of the future.
Yeah, no doubt.
No doubt.
No doubt there.
Yeah.
There's going to be some good history. There's going to be some bad history, but there's going to be a lot of history for sure.
There's going to be a lot of history.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Well, you're already seeing that happen. People, revenues are tanking. Viewership is tanking on traditional media sources because people, I saw a poll the other day where like a dramatic, like 80% of people are getting their news from podcasts. And I was like, wow, it's a big shift in the way that we consume information.
Yeah. And I think, I forget the study that I heard. I heard it on a podcast from James Wedmore, and he said something like super high, like 76 or like % of people don't trust like the mainstream media and have like a heightened level of distrust.
Yeah.
And so like, what are they putting their trust in? And it's in personal brands.
I believe that guy or that girl. That's my person. Yeah. No, 100%. I think the point for me was when I was watching CNN. I was locked in my house. I couldn't leave. There were millions of people out burning cars, and CNN had this chyron. You probably have seen this where it says fiery, but mostly peaceful protest. And there's like a building and a car on fire behind it. I'm like, what are we, like, I can see what's going on, right? It's not peaceful. There's a car on fire behind you, bro. That was kind of, yeah. Yeah.
We're disillusionment. We were like, does the emperor really have clothes? Like, I don't think it does.
Seems obvious, but regardless though, you are 100% correct. Podcast, independent media is the future. Streaming is not just the future, it's now. So this is why the space is amazing.
Yeah. And I have a lot of clients who for my coaching business and entertainment and in reality TV, docuseries, etc. And like from what I'm hearing in that side of the industry, they have no idea how to navigate content. Like, how do you, like the old school of like the Jersey Shore and all that, people aren't tuning into that on TV. They have streaming services and Netflix, and then they have their own media. And then Gen Z is looking at TikTok. So what type of media gets produced. And I think that it's really about building your own personal brand. And I think we're just already just diving into the podcast here. So
yeah, we're like elbow deep in
yes.
this important topic right now.
Yes. Yeah. And so with building a personal brand, Mark, like that's one of your specialties, is doing that around podcasting and helping people establish themselves with a podcast. What have you seen having a podcast does for a business or a personal brand?
It helps you to show up. It helps you stay top of mind. This is amazing to me, but every single client that I have has come through podcasting, whether they've listened to my podcast directly or if I've shown up in their LinkedIn profile day after day after day, year after year, whether it's someone who listened to my podcast, who referred me to someone else, whether it's a stage that I've been on because of my podcast, every opportunity that I've gotten is from it. And when you put the right systems in place, it becomes autopilot. I show up for 20 minutes, I record a podcast, I fill out a form, and then my team takes care of everything on the back end. So it's shocking to me how few people actually understand what's happened in using the right team, the right tools, AI, the right strategies. It's just tremendously valuable.
Yeah, I think the key point you touched on is having a team. And where I see so many podcasters, 90% of podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes. I truly believe it's because of that word, that they do not have a team backing them. They do not have team. They're not used to hiring. They're not used to being an employer, or even just if it's a VA or a contract laborer that you're hiring, like have someone that is putting in that work, because having a podcast, even if it's just a condensed podcast, even if it's just a project podcast that is just intentionally a 10 episode run, it provides depth and insight into what you do. And one of the things that I work with my clients on when they're guesting on podcasts is the goal of the guesting is that by the time somebody comes to your website to book a call with you, to have that discovery call, to like with the intention of like, I want to work with you, that any belief system that may be holding them back, any objection, has already been addressed on a podcast interview.
That's right. I mean, you get kind of like a celebrity type feel. It's funny, someone will hop on a call with me like, oh, I feel like I already know you. I've listened to 3 of your episodes. In fact, this happens without fail, by the way. Every time I go to a conference, I'll have at least 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 people come up to me. Are you Mark? Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, I listen to After Hours Entrepreneur all the time. This is so cool. It gave to me. Let me take a selfie. It happens every time. And I'm like, the first thing I think is, oh, this is cool. The second thing I think is like, where have you been? Why have you not like messaged me on Instagram or anything? Who are you? But then I get that connection. But anyway, that's just the world we live in, right? People want to do business with the people they know, like, and trust. And if you've already gotten the know and trust down through the podcast, then it's just a matter of showing up and vibing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's about, if you vibe with the person, if you get along, all the hard work the sale is already done. Now it's just time to make sure that they like you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you touched on something that's really poignant that I've seen in podcasting, especially is that action piece, like when you meet a fan and someone comes up and is like, how come you haven't messaged me or like said something? How getting the audience to take some piece of action, like what are your best strategies for that next step? Because in many cases, especially with guesting and with podcasters that I've worked with as their coach, like the numbers for podcasting don't necessarily translate always into social media numbers. And so what is that key pivotal, those key calls to action that drive the behavior and engagement for the audience to actually deeper engage rather than just consuming?
Well, it's very difficult. One of the things that I love about YouTube is the data is there. All the analytics are there. Mm-hmm. Podcasting, the data and analytics are not there. And frankly, it's been one of the challenges in building up my podcast agency is showing that direct link from you have a podcast, you have a sale, right? Sometimes I look back and I'm like, man, I wish I was boring and lame and I just did ads all the time, because then I can show we spent $2, we made $5, right? Mm-hmm. Podcasting is a little bit different in that it's hard to see, it's hard to make that direct connection on your return on ad spend or your return on resources. But it's kind of like the wind. That something is happening because you can feel it. You see the people at the events. You get the DMs on LinkedIn. The people are telling you. So that's part of it. That said, I think when it comes to getting someone to take action, it's all about giving something away. And I think it's hard to find the best thing to give away. I'm going to give a shout out to a guy I had on my show a couple of weeks ago. His name is Lead Gen J. Lead Gen J. Great name. You know what he does. You know what he's about. He's in the lead.
Very straightforward.
He's and which is brilliant, by the way. If we are too clever, we confuse, and if you confuse, you lose. So we don't want to be too clever. But one of the things that he did, one of the calls to action that he had when he was on my show as a guest, was he said, "I'm Lead Gen J. If you go to this website, I will give you 800,000 leads for free. It's a list of 800,000 leads. They're yours, free. Go get them at my website." And I'm thinking to myself, hey, that's a lot of leads. I don't even know what I would do with that many leads, but maybe I'll get my AI email infrastructure going. But I'm saying, if you are interested in leads, you want to go to Lead Gen J because he's going to give you almost 1 million leads like that.
Yeah.
So it's finding that, this is what I do. This is the problem, not just the problem that you think someone has, but the problem that they actually have, and then solving it. And anyway, I know that he got a lot of success from that lead magnet.
That's a killer lead magnet.
It's knowing the problem to solve. If you know that people want leads, then give them leads. If you know that people want exposure, give them exposure. And it's not, by the way, it's not always easy. I've tried dozens of lead mags. I don't know about you, but a lot of them don't work. But when you find the one that works, and we stick with it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I've noticed with podcasting specifically is the ease of what that next step is as far as a call to action. Because if you're listing off 20 different social media sites and then you have, your lead gen thing, like there's too much information. So I always recommend 2. I'm like, if you can have an auditory medium to an auditory medium, if you have a podcast, send them to your podcast. That's why it's so great. That's why the 7th step in our process is start your own podcast. Because
I love that.
Yeah, podcast listeners will convert into podcast listeners. And we had Laura Ora on our podcast, who is a top 100 podcast, and she of the Gutsy podcast. And she said she consistently sees when she guests, there's a spike in extra downloads because she's constantly guesting, and that spike adds because that's her call to action. And then the other call to action that we've seen really work is just a discovery call, because it's an auditory medium to an auditory medium. And there's something about podcasting that it's very intimate. And so people think that they know you. And so by the time, it's like that next step of like, oh, I've listened to them for 20 minutes. Yeah, let's hop on a call. That one tends to work. What I found is the lead gens of multiple email captures, you have to find the one that's like such a wow factor, like Lead Gen J, 800,000 emails, that like leads, like that's a no-brainer, holy crap, like blow your mind freemium style lead magnet. And so if you don't have one of those, look at what is that problem that you can solve and then amplify it 10x.
I'm with you on everything there. And I do think, by the way, a little compliment to you as well. One of the things I think is most important that I kind of undervalued through the last, 4.5, 5 years of my entrepreneurial journey is the power of email, how important email is to your business. Because if I'm on a podcast, as a guest, really, or if I meet someone, or if I'm in wherever, like the most valuable thing to me is how can I get their email and how can I deliver information to that email that's valuable, because that's where the sales happen. The sales happen in the email. I was actually shocked because I don't know. I don't read a lot of emails, but again, I'll give you some credit because you have a great email sequence for onboarding guests onto your show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's full of flavor. It's full of flavor. And I think that's what you want. You don't want to have a stale email. You want to know, okay, this person is different. And I think that you did a really good job, Kim, with that, because I could tell your email stood out as differently. You got the Yas Queen, you got the crown, you got all this stuff going on. And anyway, I thought that was big. But at any rate,
thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm saving all the sequences because I'm going to be mirroring them in some ways too,
Yep.
Which, by the way, if you don't, reverse engineer something that works, and that's a good way to be going. But anyway, while I get off my rant here, one of my goals at all times in this digital world is how can I get more emails into my email list? How can I get more emails onto a spreadsheet? Because those connections you cannot lose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your email list you own, your podcast you own, social media platforms you do not own, and they change algorithms time. So sending people to social is like I see people have said, oh, social media is a new business card. I'm like, but business card, you're not capturing any email.
Yeah.
And so you're not actually having that contact. It's a part of you. It's still, they get banned or blocked. And I don't know how many people there are like that I already follow on Instagram that I'm like, oh, okay, great. You're now one inside of 3,000 other people that is that we follow. So making sure that there's a follow-up with that actual direct personal connection into somebody's inbox. And now also with text messaging, but I've actually seen a call to action recently being used on podcasts. It successfully works on stages, like the phone number, but not necessarily, I don't think it translates into podcasting because I don't think it takes into consideration how people consume podcasts. Like people listen to them while they're doing other things, and particularly driving, especially for like, if you're a mom constantly in the car with carpool and chauffeuring kids around. And so I'm not pulling out my phone. I don't want more people texting and driving. That's a PSA. I don't want more people texting and driving. And so I just don't find that to be a very effective one for a call to action. Like a direct link is fine, but having someone pull their phone out and text, I don't think that takes into consideration how someone is consuming the medium of a podcast.
I think that's a really intuitive idea. I mean, I think at its essence, the challenge of getting people to take action, I mean, on social media, for sure. I mean, these companies, Facebook, Microsoft, X, they're spending billions of dollars to keep you on the platform. They have no intention of your audience saying, ooh, I like that post. Let me click that link and go off to listen to a show or watch a YouTube or something. They're spending billions of dollars to stop people from doing that, right? And it's obviously it's different in an audio atmosphere, but you're right. The nature of a podcast is I'm driving, I'm jogging, I'm doing dishes around the house, what have you. I'm not ready to click that button or to do that thing yet. And that's why I was really impressed with what Jay did. Like, I feel like we need to be kind of bombastic in a way to get someone to actually take the action. And when you hear something like 800,000 leads, you're like, wow. There's something different there. You're like, how can we be different rather than, hey, and sign up for my email list and don't forget to go to my website and I'll follow you. I find that performs very poorly, but if I can find like something that really stands out, that's where you're going to get the response.
What have you found really stands out for your clients on podcasts?
Yeah. So for me, my best response, and I focus on production side more so than guesting, but for me, I found that one of my, so this is also an important point. I guest on a lot of different shows. And so one of the first things that you did, Kim, when we got on the show was say, hey, do you have any questions? I want to know, like, who are we actually speaking to? Who is our core audience? Because depending on your core audience, you might want to have a different lead magnet, different carrot on the stick, so to speak. But one of the things I found that's gotten me a lot of ear holes and eyeballs recently is AI and using AI to empower your business. We were talking about AI automation here a little while ago. And I put together a 100-page guide on how to use ChatGPT in your business today. And it's got all my favorite prompts, some favorite strategies, some automations that you can do. And you can get that at aiupdate.ai. It's free. It's like 100 pages of just pure gasoline for your business using probably the most powerful tool in the history of humanity at aiupdate.ai. Yeah.
ChatGPT is so wonderful. And since implementing that, but you have to know how to train it. Like that's like, I see so many podcasters who started using AI and people who use AI in their marketing. And as soon as I see a rocket ship emoji and unleash or the word delve, I'm like, that was written by ChatGPT. Versus like training it on how you your natural cadence, how you speak. And there's a specific way in order to guide it to look, sound, and kind of operate as you.
That's exactly right. You need to know how to set it up properly. Prompt engineering is the most important skill of our generation right now. Over the next 10 years, prompt engineering by far. In prompt engineering, in case you're not clear on what that is, and you're like, oh no, I'm missing out on the most important skill. This is a skill that hits every industry. Prompt engineering is simply knowing what do I type into an AI program in order to get the desired result out. It's that simple. And to your point, training it, making sure you're uploading your training modules like PDFs, spreadsheets, maybe even some audio and video that you've recorded. All this can help to train your chatbot to give you a better output.
Yeah. And training it, you can input your podcast data, and like we had it analyze our podcast tone and say, okay, here's a few transcripts from past podcasts. Like, what's the overarching tone? Who is the demographic that we're speaking to based on the conversation? And really allowing it to pull the data. There was an AI expert. Her name is Robin. I think she has the podcast Unfuck Your Business or something close to that.
Yeah.
And she was speaking at She Podcast, which was like correlating with PodFast. And she said, basically, you have to think of AI like Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, it takes everything literally. It has no sense of humor. You have to, like, it does not understand metaphor. And having just watched that movie with my 6-year-old when he's like, metaphor, I was like, that's ChatGPT. It has it's going to create a really generic metaphor that probably will be called weaving the tapestry of, your story of the mosaic of your business, something like that. And unless you speak like that, you have to train it properly.
Yeah. But even just the raw, like, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up and I had to write a research paper, is the worst, because you start your research paper in school and it's a blank sheet of paper. And, I don't know about you, but my sheet of paper would stay blank for a very long period of time until you finally write that first
24
word.
hours before.
we might have gone to the same school. But with AI and especially once you get into automation, getting people to fill out forms and surveys and questionnaires, you could do some really neat stuff so that you're not actually starting on a blank slate, but you're starting out with a pretty comprehensively written product. And then you can just go in and put your own finishing touches on it. And it's remarkable. We had a really cool project I was working on with a client, and we call it the CEO blog strategy. And so basically we use LinkedIn and we DM'd hundreds of CEOs and CEO assistants. And typically these CEOs, they're busy. They're not going to respond back. They got, they got companies to run. Well, what we did is we said, hey, love what you're doing. We'd love to feature you on our blog. And we got a response back from about 15%. And they said, sure, I'd like to be on the blog. We said, okay, cool. Fill out this Google form. It'll take you about 2 to 3 minutes. Fill it out. We'll let you know when the blog goes live. So these CEOs would fill out the questionnaire with, like, what's your vision for the company? What are the biggest hurdles in your industry? What are you most excited about? How are you using AI, et cetera? And what it would do is we use Zapier. So we took those form responses, we used Zapier to automate it. We sent it to ChatGPT. ChatGPT wrote out the entire blog article and uploaded it to WordPress. And then we just had our assistant, our team member, go in and kind of clean it up, reformat it. And then once it went live, we'd message the CEO and boom, instant connection. So a very simple, almost completely fully automated way of making a connection, of writing content. And anyway, that's this type of stuff that gets me excited. And how do we actually automate AI into our workflows? Because the people that figure it out are going to be at a significant advantage over people that are still doing things the old school way, like we were with that blank sheet of paper.
Oh yeah. As Peter Diamandis says, who is one of my mentors, and I've been in his mastermind for the past couple of years, there will be the businesses in a decade from now who use AI and who work AI adjacent. And then there will be the ones that from a decade from now that you will know that they didn't use AI because there will be a close sign on them. Like 100%. It's because the speed at which you can create, like it's mind boggling at how fast. And I don't think our brains have been able to process just how rapid it can be and how rapid you can actually make those connections and scale and grow exponentially these days.
It's hard to explain until you've experienced it. My first experience with it was in podcasting about 16 months ago or so, 18 months ago. I had a key team member leave my company, said, hey, Mark, I'm moving to Spain, going to university, deuces. I said, great. I freaked out and I did what most business owners do. And I started doing the work. I became completely overwhelmed. My wife was not happy. I was not happy. Nobody was happy. And I wasn't able to find a great team right away. So what I did is I started using AI to fill in the gaps. I was shocked, Kimberly. I was able to save about 90% of my time using AI in this task. And I was like, this is nuts. So I trained my team. I said, here's money. Go try out new AI technologies. Let's find the best softwares. Any new team member I bring on, they're trained with the AI techniques. And then 3 months after using, or 4 months after using these AI tools, I quit my day job. I'm like, I'm going all in. This is, we have something here. And, when I was able to quit the 9 to 5 corporate grind to do something I enjoy every day, I want that for more people. And AI is the key right now. I believe AI is the ticket to get there.
Yeah. How did you see AI speed up the podcast process exponentially? Like what specific, was it just ChatGPT, or what other forms of AI do you like leveraging? Like we found Podcastle AI to just be game changing for sound editing, for the quality of sound that we get to produce now on our podcast without needing my editor, who was skilled and trained in sound editing, to go through and like adjust the levels and manually do all those pieces now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example. I love AI for copywriting. So, and this is a pretty obvious, this has evolved a bit since I first got into it, but we were using it to write transcriptions and then write summaries of transcriptions, descriptions, key points, potential titles and keywords. So all that very laborious written work from previously is done instantly. And then we can go in and kind of clean it up and adjust it. So that's extremely powerful. Cast Magic is a tool that I'm very bullish on. Blaine over there is just killing it. And that's what it does. You upload your audio or your video and it creates just tons of content, email lists, social media posts, blogs, all that. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. That type of work used to cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars each episode. And now it's done instantly, right?
Instantly. It's so fast.
There's some other cool stuff out there too. There's, video editing. I was just working with a client earlier today and we were doing a video recording of the trailer for their show, right? 2 brilliant ladies. It's going to be a great show. It's about parenting. They're parent coaches and they're just crushing it. And when we're recording the video, they're like, I just feel like I'm looking down at our notes a lot. I'm like, yeah, you are, but that's okay because we can use AI to make it look like you're staring at the lens. So you don't even have to look at me. You could be looking off. You could be looking cross-eyed for all I care. We're going to have you looking straight at the lens. And that's crazy. Another thing that our video editors were doing is, when you're doing pattern interrupts, where you're switching from like screen to screen when someone's talking to the person who's speaking, that is a very laborious process. But there's an AI tool called Autopod that you just update into Adobe Premiere Pro, and it will instantly segment out every time someone is speaking, and it'll switch the camera to that person instantly.
Brilliant. Yeah, we use Opus Pro to be able to produce shorts, reels for the podcast. And we do that for our clients because most podcasts don't produce assets. And so when podcasters who may not know these tools, send us the video, we'll do that for our clients so our clients can have leverage. That's the biggest thing is most of our clients don't want to necessarily have a podcast. They like guesting, they like borrowing other people's audiences, but they want, what our job is to leverage those experiences to go beyond. And the ability to produce 30 video assets would have taken my editor hours and hours to be able to clip all those and make them perfect. And Opus does it in a hot second.
It's remarkable. And this is an interesting point, something I'm thinking a lot about now. It's becoming so much easier to create content. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that a lot more people are going to be doing it. A lot more people are going to be creating content. And then they're going to be posting that content online, which is going to flood the web with tons and tons of content, right? I think what naturally is going to happen there is people are going to start to tune it out, to turn it off, so to speak. And so what does that mean? Well, it means a couple things. It means, we can't just use a tool to create the clip and post it. There's going to be there's some extra stuff that's going to go on behind the scenes. Do we add background music, or are we going to have some B-roll, some footage? Are we going to have different camera changes? Maybe the subtitles need to be tweaked, right? So what's an efficient way of actually making short videos that people are going to watch, not just say, oh, it's another one of those AI clips, right? So that's A. And B, I think it delivers more value to the actual podcast experience because people are going to start to say, oh, it's another 10-second clip. Or they might say, okay, actually I can go deeper with someone. I can actually listen to them talk and flesh out ideas for a half hour. So, as things get shorter and shorter and shorter and people are it's like a race to the bottom, I feel like, and I'm hypothesizing here, but I feel like there may be a switch to more long form content. So we'll see how that plays out.
I completely agree. I also think that there's going to be a switch to more in-person podcast interviews in general, just because I think after not having in-person connection for 2 years and understand, like, we as a generation on this planet, like, that's never been taken away from people. And so now we know what it's like to not be in connection with people and in community. And I have seen a resurgence on the conference scene and with live podcasting that in-person, human-to-human connection, we realize how much we were just starving for it because we know what it's like without it. And I think that then I just gave myself truth bumps. So,
no, I'm about, but it's interesting. The COVID lockdowns in 2020 are just such a remarkable thing. I mean, it's absolutely killed commercial real estate. Commercial real estate is basically dead now because nobody wants to go back into the office. It's nice to work from home. I like work.
Yeah,
it's nice. It's amazing. I wish more people could do it. And so it's killed commercial real estate. And I do think there's value in that human-to-human connection, because when you bring a team together and they're all vibing off each other and high-fiving and you got the sale, that's different than someone like texting in Slack saying, I got the sale. Like, all right. So that's different. And I will say another, you may have noted this as well, Kim, the biggest shows, like all the big podcasts, are in person. Very, 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 very few shows are remote. So if you're serious about getting the best quality product, that is going to come from the in-person stuff. And I'm investing thousands of dollars in my in-person equipment so I can do more of that for that reason. So the very astute trend there, the in-person stuff is higher quality. It's more work to get it done, but it makes a difference.
It does make a huge difference. And you see it in the reels, because you're no longer editing through a Zoom that you've uploaded and that, may have internet connection or stability issues. It's camera direction, like it's beautiful and it's a lot more crisp. And so I agree with you. The top 0.5%, like those podcasts, those ones are crushing it with in person.
They're in person. The other problem with in person is you have to deal with 4K quality. I mean, maybe I'm a stickler to 4K, but a 4K, plus you're going to need a producer in-house, typically someone who's there to make sure that the audio and video is working. But man, if you haven't worked with 4K, the files are huge. They're huge.
They're gigantic.
An hour, like I'll just, for someone who's maybe not in the industry, like if I'm doing a regular like 1080p, like an hour long, it's probably like 5 gigs. A 4K is probably going to be like 250 gigs. So it's exponentially, it's so difficult to work with, but the end result looks so much better. And I do think that they, like with what you said as far as your hypothesis and future prediction of, as more and more people produce more and more content, what's the consumption factor? I mean, because I already noticed myself, I put an app to protect on my app so I don't go onto Instagram, so I actually get a lot more done. It's a great app. It's called Opal. Highly recommended, because the other one I was just too smart for. I just kept on outsmarting it and just hitting like snooze. Oh, it's one button away. It's too easy for me. But this one, it really blocked, and it was beautiful. And the experience of like consciously choosing to not consume as much, because there is so many studies, especially now, being done with kids and social media and how it's impacted mental health. We just look at the mental health crisis that we have in this country alone, let alone the world. And a lot of it is stemming from constant consumerism, which is where I do think that when we expand and stretch out the attention span to be able to have a really entertaining and engaging conversation, like on a podcast, it changes the dynamic of how we're able to interact and connect with content. And I think just like we are starving for actual human-to-human connection, we're starving for quality conversations that are not just so divisive and so like quick to just be a keyboard warrior and just drop a hate comment somewhere. Yeah, I have a 4-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter. And, I really like Facebook. I'll just say, I like Facebook. I like LinkedIn. My life is better for these. Google Maps is awesome. I was traveling down to Miami the other day. I never would have made my destination without Google Maps. I would have, if I had my old road atlas.
Thomas guide.
I'm like print up my MapQuest. Like even MapQuest was cool, but like GPS is like unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I mean, the reality is that when it comes to social media, short form content, algorithms that promote the extreme ideas, AI influencers, billions of dollars in tech designed to keep you on the platform by releasing dopamine in your brain. This is a huge experiment. This is an experiment at the scale that humanity has never seen before. And I love that idea of trying to find a way to deprive yourself of it, right? Like, I like cookies. If you bring home a box of cookies, I ain't going to see daylight, right? So what do? I just don't bring cookies in the house because I know I'm going to eat them all, you know? And so that idea of, well, I know if I start scrolling on Instagram, it's going to be a doom scroll for an hour and I'm going to lose an hour of productivity. I'm just going to block the damn thing. Like, this is the stuff, and entrepreneurs don't talk about this enough, but there are so many distractions that happen as an entrepreneur. I really think that that's the difference in successful entrepreneurs and non. It's the discipline. It is discipline, and I struggle with it too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think every entrepreneur does, and especially when there's so much distraction, there also is so much potential for it to be under the guise of work. Like being on LinkedIn, being on Facebook, like I generate clients from there. I promote my offers on there. And so yes, it does generate clients in business. And is that actually really, like, how much of it is actually driving business and how much of it is consumerism? And one of my friends, Misty Gilbert, who's a great coach, business coach, she said, just look at your hourly rate. Like, even though I don't charge by the hour, like break it down as far as like your hourly rate as a CEO of a company. And is you going on social media for however long you check your phone and you look at the data for how long you've been on it, is that worth that amount of money that would technically be your hourly rate? And I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, that's like $5,000 a day. No, thank you. No, it's not worth it. It's just not worth, like, so we are able to, our minds are able to play tricky things. And even for the solopreneur who's just getting started out with podcasting or getting their business out there, who's, doing the Canva images, are those actually what's generating business? No, typically it's a one-on-one conversation. No. It's building relationships.
Yeah. And it's funny, we went this right way. I was talking to Noah Kagan. He's the founder of AppSumo. He's on After Hours Entrepreneur a few weeks ago. And I think in some cases, the point was that we often as entrepreneurs distract ourselves with what really matters, getting on the one-to-one call and making the damn sale. We do all these other things. Like, I got to make my lead magnets and I got to build my funnels and I've got to optimize my LinkedIn profile. And I got to get the perfect domain and maybe the colors on my logo are not right. None of that matters. Get on the damn phone and make a call and make the sale, because all that other stuff doesn't, at the end of the day, doesn't matter. Like, it's about getting that sale. And what I have found personally is that I've wasted so much time building out all these other things. And then you go to launch the offering, whatever, and it doesn't work. Or maybe you get a sale or two and it's like, oh, I spent all this time, I didn't get the return back. That's because I didn't take the time up front to actually get on the phone with people and say, hey, do you want to buy this? Yep, cool. Let me lock it in. Let me lock it in. Nope, you don't. Because what you'll find, and this is Noah's point, what you find when you try to sell something, it doesn't sell. A, you save yourself the time, you don't have to make it. But B, you're going to find what the real problem is. His example was, hey, if you're going to start a dog walking business and you make 20 calls and nobody wants dog walking, they want dog sitting. Well, you just saved yourself all the time of building out an entire business around something that won't work.
Exactly. I think a lot of smart entrepreneurs, they end up working backwards from what is the actual problem. Instead of building out the funnel and the class and doing all the things, it's like, is this really something that people would want? And then if it is something that people would want to buy, then they go and create the product. But if it's not, and for me, when I think of it in that terms, I'm like, is it something that people will buy? Can I get them to an order checklist and a pre-order form so that they already have purchased it, that's offsetting the cost of creating it?
100%. I think after having that conversation with Noah, I'm not going to build anything until I actually make the sales. Cause like I could waste an entire week building out like an entire funnel for something. And it's like, it just wastes so much time. And on that reverse engineering thing, I think is important. I think it was Sean Cannell who I was talking to about this. Think Media. He was on the After Hours Entrepreneur also. And he had made a point that I actually think about a lot, and I hear a lot of people say, and it's this term, nobody's doing it. Nobody's done it. Nobody's thought of it. Spoiler alert, somebody has. And if you don't see it out there, it's probably because there's a problem with that business model. It's probably because there's a problem with that offering. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's impossible to find your blue ocean strategy or unique idea, but 99.9% of the time, if it's not being done, it's probably because there's something wrong with that idea. So, you know, anyway, and then that's why it kind of brings me back to sell it first before you even start to build it. Anything, just try to sell it first. DM people you take a few hours, DM people on LinkedIn, shoot it out to your email list, maybe even talk about it on your podcast. And I can't repeat this enough because I've wasted so much time building things. And
same here. Yeah, we literally took a lighter fluid and a match to 7 years of systems that I had built inside of our initial CRM for my coaching company, Ground Yourself, and just took a lighter to it, like blew it up, transferred everything over to Kajabi, narrowed down our offers to 2, and that's it. Like wow. And those were the ones that really sold, that really worked. I said, we're not going to focus on anything else. Like I don't want to focus on having 15 different products and a membership over here with a small handful of people and then something else over here. I think the hard part is for visionary entrepreneurs when we get that shiny object syndrome, and there's so much possibility and so much we can create, and we're never shy from ideas. And I think that's why having a team that like just can hone you in and say, okay, this is the main focus. Like, let's keep our eye on the main focus. And like one of the books that I follow is Traction by Gina Wickman. As far as like this, keep the core focus of the product. And what started our agency was after launching a product, Communication Queens, the course on how to build your 7-figure, your 7-step program to profiting from guest podcasting as your form of lead generation. Like my social media manager was like, Kim, this is a completely different brand. It's a completely different business, and it's totally off the mark from what Ground Yourself really teaches, which is conscious leadership. And so we ended up starting the second company because we then pulled our audience after a failed launch. Like we had a successful launch, then we had a failed launch. And I said, well, what is it? What is the real bottleneck? And they said, well, we just don't want to do it ourselves. I was like, oh, okay, we can do it for you. That's fine. Like they didn't want a done by you course. They didn't want to have the templates. They didn't even want the list, even though we were giving 1,000 podcasts of like how to connect with 1,000 podcasts. Nope. They wanted it done for them. Just get them booked, let them show up, let them be the star. And so we did that.
It's like we learn things over time, right?
It's amazing.
Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn, you know?
So what was your biggest learning lesson as you grown and expanded your podcast?
Well, so from my podcast itself, the After Hours Entrepreneur, which is now ranked top 1% globally. Thank you everyone for listening. Yeah, it's been unbelievable. I think the top lesson I've learned was to just be my unique self. And this come to a head in a few different occasions. The first where I really got a taste of this is I had Jasmine Starr on my podcast, who's a tremendous photographer, creator.
Amazing. Yeah.
She's awesome. And at the time I had brought her on, I had done probably about 100, 150 interviews. But when she came on, I had never experienced anyone like her before. She was using slang and gesticulation, the way that she was dressed. Different. She was her unique self. And I think, you know, when I first got into podcasting, I think what a lot of people think when they get into podcasting is I have to do it a certain way with a certain vernacular, and I got to talk like Tom Brokaw, and I got to change my persona, when it's actually the opposite. You want to know, like, who are you and how can you be different? How can you lean into what makes you different? You know, what are the words you use? What's the cadence you use? How loud do you talk? And so that was one thing that I know. It was kind of funny. We had shared some clips of her, and I think she said something like to the effect of, well, the hood answer. And people in the comments were angry. They're like, what do you know about the hood? You shouldn't be talking about the hood, da-da-da. And it was funny because that clip had reached tens of thousands of people, and that, you know, by doing this, by not being vanilla, you're going to turn people off.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good thing. You want to be a magnet. You want to attract who you want to attract. You want to repel who you want to repel.
Mm-hmm. And so who did you notice that you started repelling?
Let me answer a different way. I don't want to talk about who I repel. I want to talk about who I attract.
Yeah.
So I had an experience about 6 months ago. I had gone to a lecture by Jordan Peterson, who's, you've kind of heard him, huge personality psychologist in Canada. He became very, I guess, popular, controversial because he didn't want to be forced to use pronouns of people. And I went to, I'd listened to him. I think he has some great ideas. And I went to one of his conferences and I shared a picture on LinkedIn. And some people didn't like Jordan Peterson. But I had gotten a message from a few people that said, hey, Mark, I want to join your mastermind group because I want to be around people that are meritocratic and follow personal responsibility. I saw you at this JP conference. I want to be part of what you're doing, And so while I turned off some people were like, oh, wow, that's the type of people that I want to be around. Right. And I think there's pros and cons to that, but, because he's unfortunately become more political, but just due to that topic of pronouns, regardless, leaning into what you believe and not standing down, it pays dividends. And I think people underestimate that. I think is what people underestimate in this new age of the internet, for better or for worse. We could go deeper onto that.
Yeah.
In that you cannot be for everyone. You are not CNN or NBC or, you can't appeal to everyone. That's why like Fox is the most popular television channel, because they know who they're talking to. They're not hiding the ball. And so when you know who you talk to and you bring them the information, you get a better response.
Yeah.
With that said, I want to say something. I just want to say one thing here.
Yeah.
Because I think this is kind of in the same time, while it's important to be successful in the digital marketing world, there are some real consequences to our society as a whole, in that algorithms are pushing people to only hear ideas that they want to hear and only see people that they want to see and not be exposed to other ideas. And I think that that's dangerous because you don't become great just sitting in a room with people rubbing your back and saying, you're so great. And I agree with you. My wife makes me better because she calls me out on my BS. You know what I'm saying?
My husband does too. Yeah.
We need them.
And I think that when you create it, the algorithms are curated to create an echo chamber. And I think being aware of the chamber in which you're choosing to surround yourself with and how diverse are the perspectives, because I had Brent Hamachek on my podcast, who's the co-founder of Common Ground Campus, where they take two people of polar opposite sides on an issue and they have a conversation, hopefully not a debate, it's to reach a common ground. And I love the model because I think that we are so much more alike than we are different. And when we can have that and let that, it circles back to long form content where it's not this clickbait, polarizing, mic drop, inflammatory 90 seconds where you get up in an upheaval and you get to be a keyboard warrior and post your thoughts and share your comment, versus when you actually get to have a longer form discussion and listen to somebody thoughtfully discuss their position, whether you agree with them or not. It allows for you to expand your belief system and sharpen what is it that you can resonate with, what is it that you don't like, and then also for us to be able to examine our own triggers of like, what is it specifically about this person that's bothering me, and how is that still a part of me? Like that's more what I work on in my coaching realm as far as perception is projection, but being able to be aware of like, what are we projecting into our own world and how much of an echo chamber are we creating?
And to be fair, we're in the marketing business. I'm in the marketing business, right? And I just realized the nature of where we're at. If I have a client that wants to make money, you're going to have to be kind of polarizing. You can't really pull back punches, so to speak. The podcast is where you get to go deep. TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn, that's where you have 3 seconds. So you got to slap people around. You got to slap, like, I'll give you an example. I was doing this coaching or this podcast recording with these clients, and I said, hey, what are 10 commonly held beliefs in your industry that are just wrong? And then let's call out those commonly held beliefs and let's be boisterous. And they were doing it, and they were kind of, they were good, but they didn't have that juice. And I said, let me show you how it's done. I kind of got warmed up. I got on the mic I looked in the mic and I said, you need to spank your kids. And I kind of went into like a short, and listen, I'm not the kind of guy, I spank my kids almost never, maybe like once a year, but it's not just like a smack. It's like, you know what you did, here's the penalty. Now write me an essay as to why you won't do it again. Which is hard for a 4-year-old, but the point of it was not to say, hey, this is how you need to parent. The point of it was to slap someone in the face, because now what's going to happen is half the comments are going to be like, I agree, spanking can be a good thing. I was spanked and I turned out okay. And the other half are going to be like, spanking a kid is never right. It just teaches a system of violence. And so you get that discussion going, okay, you want to go deeper? You're going to have to listen to a podcast episode, and then we're going to go deeper. So anyway, I don't know how I completely went down that rabbit hole, but
yeah, that is a powerful example. I mean, and as someone who does have a different perspective, it's like, oh, damn. And it's like being able to hold the space. Like how much space can you hold for somebody to like have the conversation, to try to understand their perspective, to explore other options, and to like see something from somebody else's eyes, because I think that that's how we find a common ground, and we are able to attract. And so yes, it does attract haters, and there will be certain things. Like I had one person who was like, oh, she doesn't understand, being, because I said, I don't care whether you've experienced whatever you've experienced. If you are perpetuating a victim mindset in yourself, you are choosing then consciously repeat your own abuse and trauma. And people are like, you're perpetuating being a victim of violence against victims. And I'm like, no, as someone who has a history of different types of abuse, like I am saying you are in charge of your story. And that's where I take a huge stand.
Yes.
And so it's those topics that I love, that even when you can disagree, you can understand like how to leverage them. And one of the things that we talk about at Communication Queens is having a polarizing perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be inflammatory. Like I just had a lawyer on who is all about building love into your contracts, and like conscious love of like respecting other people's positions and being able to create something that's fair, that's a win-win-win around, instead of it being like, I'm going to get you with my contract. And I was like, that's a totally different perspective than how we all perceive legal. But it's because it's different that it stands out. And that's why sometimes the perspective can be your story. Like one of our clients, I said, what makes you different from being like every other spiritual intuitive coach? Because she's an amazing multiple 6- and 7-figure business owner, built 4 successful businesses. I said, what makes you different though? And she shared her story about how she was sex trafficked and prostituted at 19. I was like, that we can pitch. That's different. That is the different story that then we can then talk about what it means to listen to your intuition and what happens when you don't. I mean, not that, if you don't listen to your intuition, you're going to get sex trafficked and prostituted, but like, if the experiences of getting put into those situations when you don't listen to your gut, and how to then leverage that, and what that taught her, it provided her with so much more rich stories for podcasts that we were getting her booked on.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, because what people are looking for is story, and a good story is a transformation. It's, I was down here, now I'm up here. It's a good story is not, I was born into poverty and I had a very difficult life and then I died poor. Like that's not interesting. I'm not saying, I mean, that happens and that's not a good thing, but that's not an interesting story. An interesting story is not, well, I grew wealthy and I was rich and, my life was pretty easy. That's not interesting. What's interesting is I had a major traumatic event. It was very difficult for me, but I persevered through it. I had a plan, I enacted the plan, and this is what the transformation looked like on the other side. To me, that is one of the most poisonous things that's happening in our day and age, is the idea of I'm a victim. Because I'm a victim, I'm interesting. You are not interesting because you're a victim. Exactly. You're interesting because of you handle that hardship. At least that's the way I see it. Gosh, can you imagine going about life just looking to be offended by everything? It's like, it's very sad. It's very sad. It will create a very, very sad life when you going around expecting the world to cater to every little aspect and the purity of who you think you are. And that is it. There's no wonder that there's a mental health crisis in this country and in the Western world.
because of people's expectations of how they should be treated and thus treat others in a different, project those expectations out onto the world. And thus,
it's very sad.
Culture. It's very sad.
And honestly, I will say that, as we usher in this new world of AI, we have a lot of control to either make this better or make this much worse, because the way the AI is trained, AI is going to touch everything from your cell phone to your computer to everything, to your television, to your car. I think that one of the greater threats to humanity right now is infusing artificial intelligence in all of our data with bad information, with victim mentality, with oppressor oppressed. It's very dangerous. We can't. And honestly, Google Gemini just took it on the chin last week. I don't know if you saw this, but Google Gemini is like their Chat GPT bot, and what Google did is they released their image generator. So you could type in an image like, tiger flying a plane or something. But what it would not do is generate an image of a white family. If you said, please generate an image of a white family, it wouldn't do it. It refused. It said, this is, not diverse, and this is gender stereotype, and all this stuff. But if you were to type in something like, show me a picture of a Nazi, it would give you a black Nazi, it would give you an Asian Nazi. It would not give you a white Nazi. And I think we can all agree Nazis are bad. But what the hell are you doing, Google? Black Nazis? Like, this is insanity. Or it would say, give me a picture of a black family. And it was extremely stereotypical, let's just say. And it's like, they had to pull it back because it was just so over the top ridiculous. They took away the image generation. We don't need that. That's not helping anyone. But what is more scary to me now is they've pulled back the image generation, but the entire AI model is still out there. You can still use it to generate information. And so this is what our brains are going to be trained on, is this AI information. You're not going to say, I'm going to go to Google. You're saying, I'm going to go to, to Gemini. And if Gemini is giving you back this like weird rewritten, this is another one. If you said, generate me some images of the founding fathers, you weren't getting George Washington. You were getting some weird Asian woman on a boat. There was a black woman who was like riding some horse with a sword. It's like, you're literally rewriting history right in front of us. So anyway, I could go on and on and on about this. Some of the stuff I talk about, but yeah.
I love that conversation because I do truly believe that we are living in the most pivotal time in human history as far as what we're creating for the world for our children. And as a mother of a 6 and a 2-year-old and 2 boys, and I know as parents, like, what we're preparing our kids for is, I don't think any of us are even aware of the scope of the radical change that's going to happen in our entire systems in the next 20 years, whether it's from education to healthcare to government to finances. Everything is going to be so radically changed. And how are we preparing? And I think one of the beautiful things is on the consciousness side, on the good side of AI, is that it's training us to learn how to ask questions, which is something we have not been taught in schools for a long time, is how to ask, how to probe questions, how to prompt, how to get the information and extract the information that we want. It is training us to literally command what we want, which is how we actually command and train our subconscious minds to respond and manifest our reality. So in that positive way, I think it actually can be really beneficial for humanity as long as we choose to consciously be aware of what everything that we're putting online in the metaverse, in the whole internet. Everything is being pulled into and with AI, and we have to be aware of what we're inputting in order to see what we're going to get out, because it isn't a giant experiment as far as like, what are we going to get in the next 20 years? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? Is it going to be what?
It's going to be different.
It's going to be different. That's for sure. And I think as entrepreneurs, like, we have to be prepared for the change. And I think that being able to put yourself out there so that you are a leading voice in the change, like, if this does matter for you, for your future generation, for your family, then getting into some form of long form content that can be consumed in a longer way, podcasting or guest podcasting, that is gold. So Mark, I have loved our conversation so much. I could talk to you for another hour or two, maybe 2, probably 2, but we could go on for a long time about this. And I want to respect your time. And I just know, I know we can go listen to the After Hours Entrepreneur. Where else can we find you? How can we work with you and get our podcasts and our voices out into the world?
Yeah, you can listen to the After Hours Entrepreneur on your favorite player. I really focus on how you can grow your business, generate income. My income reports, by the way, are very popular. I do an income report once a month. And then you can, if you enjoyed the AI conversation, definitely follow me on YouTube, Mark Savant on YouTube, where I'm breaking down these types of topics. We're watching video. We're learning how to use AI in our business. Go to YouTube, type in Mark Savant. You'll find me.
Awesome. And all those links will be in the show notes. So just click the links below in the description. As always, stand out and be heard.
Thank you so much for listening. If you love this episode, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. For more tips on guest podcasting, storytelling, and communication strategies, follow us on social media at Communication Queens Agency and visit us at communicationqueens.com. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And in the meantime, remember, your story has the power to save one life. Let your story and your voice be heard.